Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. I like to take this time because I feel that our guest is coming with a couple of things that I personally deem very expensive, and that is time. That precious commodity is misused by so many because they do not understand the value of it. How we utilize the 24 hours that is given to every man and woman on this planet will say much about you. The other is the journey. The journey housed who you were and made them who they are today. Powerful, wise, uh, humble, all of those things. And so we are honored to have Bret here to come and share both of these two very expensive commodities with us. We thank you so much for coming, Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much for having me on, Ken. I very much am honored to be able to share a little bit about my journey. I love what you're doing with inspiring people to what I call come alive. It's what is really my purpose these days, is to inspire people to come alive. There's a lot of components to that, but for me, inspiring people to understand who they are and their purpose and all the processes that go into it. I mean, I am now in what I call the third stage of my life. If you think about a hockey game, if you will,
Yeah.
where there's three periods of life. I have looked at life as the first period is one of study. The second period is one of some form of success, if you will. It doesn't have to be financial, but just success. And the third period is significance. And, for me, my stage of life is to try to give back. You talk about serving. That's the stage of life that I'm in, taking some of the things that I've learned through my marriage, through my parenting, through my career, and trying to give back in a way that inspires people to come fully alive. So it's an honor for me to be here, and I thank you for having me on your show.
It is always an honor to have someone that is able to and willing to share and open up, because I know that we all have an opportunity to begin the journey. Some of us, because of fearfulness, refuse to start, or just because of whatever. But I love having the conversation with those who jumped in, if you will. So, talk to us. One of our customs here is to go back into the family. The family unit, I tell people, is the space by which we visit there for a while. And we have these scientists that are called parents, and they are now going to impart their thesis that they have studied and gained from their life. And one of the things that I've been telling everyone is that we're all traumatized to some degree, and it is from the trauma that we are given birth. Sometimes it's usually, Brett, a very small thing that a mom and dad may do. Of course, you have the major things, but it could be mom and dad just busy, and that individual wants their attention, and mom and dad said, no, we can't right now. And that child interprets that as rejection. And then he or she will now begin to formulate perceptions from that trauma and live their life. Invite us into your family unit. What was it like when you were there as a young buck, as they say?
Yeah. So I grew up here in Southern California, which is where I still live. I have an older brother. I'm just one of two. He's 3 years older. And what I like to tell people is that the first test I ever failed, or remember failing as a kid, was I was asked to name the 4 seasons. And I said football, basketball, baseball, and hockey, because in my
Nice.
family, my family of origin, it seems like
Yeah.
athletics was such a critical thing. My father was is still alive. He was a city of Los Angeles street surveyor his entire career, but he was also a coach, if you will,
Yeah.
for us, my brother and I. And so athletics had a significant component of stuff. Competition,
Yeah.
and all forms of it was a significant component of things. My dad, I think, if you looked at and I was clear on my upbringing and what was impactful for me, is my father was one who was very much of a disciplinarian coach type thing, not in
Yeah.
a harsh way, but in a way that basically ensured that his two sons never got big headed in terms of like who they were. You know, if
Yeah.
you play baseball in your little league, usually the right fielder is the one that you kind of stick people out into. And my dad made sure, for instance, that my brother and I always played right field, just to always recognize that, you know, it's a team sport and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was the family of origin was very much athletic minded, and so yeah, it had a significant impact on my life up till now.
Yeah, I tell people that to get involved in type sports, because sports, in any sports, what it does more so than a physical thing, it's a mental thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one begins to practice the power of the mind over the body at a young age. And so you're able to walk with it through life and get through a lot of things that other people definitely will, but you have like a quote unquote a head start if you understand the connection and you're able to move through a little faster, if you will. As you were growing up and you named the seasons appropriately, and you're moving through life, and dad is also overseeing you guys and making sure that you understand that behavior as far as being in control of it and your head, as you say, and you're moving through life. How did you relate to others, Bret? Because here's this dad that is, of course, wanting to make sure his sons are on the right path. How did you relate to others from that perspective where your dad was the overseer of want to make sure that you are not big in the head, if you will?
You know, I'd like to think now at my age that I related with my peers for sure in a positive manner. The fact of the matter was is that my dad, having made sure that neither myself nor my brother ever developed, you know, big heads in terms of our
Hmm.
athletic, you know, abilities, and we were both very good athletes, so you know it
Yeah,
was important that that was the case. Yeah, I think back and I think to myself that there was a component of being a captain that I always found myself, you know, being, you know, the captain of
yeah,
the team. And captain's very interesting, you know, especially at a young age like that, as I think about it, because it can imply that you're above others, but that wasn't the case. The
yeah,
case was is that the captain brought the team together. And so, you know, I find myself still to this day thinking of myself more as a captain. And I think that that was the benefit of my dad having raised us the way that he did, was to remember that teamwork matters, and that interaction and relationship with others as a result of that was important. Now, was I perfect inside of that? You know, clearly no, none of us are.
yeah,
But it's still something that I remember distinctly of gathering the troops together to do something and to lead a charge as the captain of that team, but also to serve in that capacity too. You know, the
yeah,
best captains are the ones who are serving others. They're not the ones
yeah.
who are, you know, having to be out front all the time. So yeah, that comes to mind to me as I think about relating with others.
Yeah, I took that. I took that into my because again, I was some similar. Grew up in sports and so forth. I took that mentality in my corporate life when I was, um, and I hated when they called me boss. I didn't like that at all. And so I would say the same thing like you. I said, "Wait a minute, we are a team member, and I am the captain of that team, and each one of us has a role to play within that team. I'm no greater than you. I simply have a little more responsibility than you." And so we worked as a team, and we were able to get a lot done, achieve a lot that we were always exceeding ourselves because I made them look and felt as a team member, and that one is not better than the other. and that we all needed each other. And those that you see them that has that little edge, if you will, and you try to move everyone along. Some move a little faster and so forth. You have to learn how to manage that. But yeah, I took it with me in my corporate world, and it's a good lesson to practice. So here you are, you're growing up, and you are quote unquote experiencing the leadership ability from a young age, and you're moving forward in your life, Bret, and you're heading into college. What was that picture like where you're looking at going, say, I want to go in this direction versus that direction? What did you start to see, and why was it pulling you into that direction that you chose?
I was very naive going into to college. And then when I say naive is I didn't really know exactly what it was that I wanted to do. I remember as a kid having driven I grew up in lower middle class, neighborhood. And I remember as a
Yeah.
kid driving with my father and passing by a particular business area in Southern California, and I remember looking at a tall building, and I thought to myself at the time, I want to work in one of those buildings someday. And it was
Yeah.
something that was very different than my father. And it
Yeah.
wasn't anything like I didn't want to follow my father's footsteps. I thought that's where I want to be someday. Well, years later, it turns out that when I went to college, I studied business, thought,
Yeah.
that maybe that was a path that I wanted to pursue. And believe it or not, Ken, that years later, when I got my first job, literally one of the buildings that we passed by was the place where I ended up working at, which was amazing. Now,
Wow.
don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. It wasn't like I had that picture of that building on
Yeah.
my above my desk
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
college, and I'm going to get to there. I was
Yeah.
naive. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I again, the athletics thing was really a driver on this. Let me tell you this funny
Hmm.
story, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
When college recruiting came around in my junior year, a firm came to school, and I did an on-campus interview. And at the time, there were 8 large accounting firms, and they were called
Mm.
the Big Eight. That's what they were called.
Mhm.
And so the recruiter looks at me and she says to me, Bret, tell me what you know about the Big Eight. And I look at her and I said, with all seriousness, I know it's a football conference in the Midwest somewhere. And she looked at me with a look of like, is he messing with me or does he literally not know? And I had this very honest and authentic look in my eyes like, wait, you're not talking about a Midwest football conference? She said, no, the Big Eight accounting firms, like one of them that you're trying to interview for. And I said, oh, I had no idea. It turns out that that firm made me an offer of which I accepted. And I'm guessing that it was probably because of authenticity more so than skill set.
I love that story. But life is like that, though, Brad, isn't it? It is. I tell people that life is a series of decisions,
Yes.
and most of them are you make it, and not making it. It's kind of a benign thing, but you're inside. You deposited something deep within you, and you just plant a seed. Basically, that decision, some decisions, a planting of a seed, and others is the reaping of that seed. And so when you plant that seed, it I believe when you say it with we call it faith, for a lack of a better word, we call it faith. And I think when you plant that type of seed, it manifests. But I absolutely believe that, because that's a part of personal development as you move forward and so forth. So here you got a chance to experience that wonderful story. I love it. So here you are. You studied. You got you're in your fancy building, if you wish, and you're living life and you're moving through life. As you were in that space, Brett, and you're doing all the things that we are told that one should do and get all the accolades and so forth. Talk to me about you. What internally, what was that discussion that you were having with you when there was no one around, when you're driving in your car heading to the next building, if you will, or the next meeting? Hey, we have these internal dialogue with ourselves. What was that like about that you were having?
It's a wonderful question, and one that I am very aware of, actually, and it
Yeah.
has been something that I've been aware of across my life. Listen, when I started at this firm, I barely had two nickels to my name to rub together. I had
Yeah.
one suit; it was my graduation suit. I had, two pairs of shoes. I bought four shirts, three ties, and wore the same suit. And this is for a really prestigious firm, right? And so
Yeah.
it was very interesting. And as I started in my career, it was literally the first time that my bank account actually grew in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
The early part was, I think, excitement around the opportunity to have some resources to my
Yeah.
name to where, I could, in a sense, have some of the things that I thought might bring a little bit of happiness. Okay.
Yeah.
What I found, though, relatively early on was that it didn't bring contentment. It
Yeah.
didn't bring joy per se. And so
Yeah.
I remember driving on the 405 freeway, which is the main artery here in Southern California. And you don't drive on the 405 freeway, you inch on the 405 freeway. And I remember inching along on the 405 freeway and thinking to myself, is this it? Like, this
Yeah.
is it? Like, this is all, there's got to be more. And I remember having this thought that there is such a larger story that's going on. And I think we all feel this way. I
Yes,
believe
I
we all
think
feel
so.
this way. There's
Yeah.
such a much larger story that's going on. And I know I'm a part of it, but my story, even as large as it feels like to me, is really small in
Yeah.
comparison to the whole thing. And what I've always wanted to do is to tap into that larger story, whatever that is, right? And so I remember that early on in my career. Again, I was trying to establish myself and just get a
Yeah.
base footing, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of resources, in terms of, you know, comfort level, whatever the case is, in terms of I wasn't married at the time, in terms of finding somebody, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And those are all very important parts
Yeah.
of the story, but there's something bigger. And
Yeah.
it never really was not an awareness for me. It maybe wasn't a pursuit of what exactly it was, but there was
Hmm.
an awareness there. And it stemmed a lot from like thinking, wait, this is what I was working for, and this is now I have this car, and yet, okay, all I'm
Yeah.
doing inching. Like,
Yeah.
there's got to be something more. There's got to be more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a powerful story that you told, because all of us, I believe all of us have that feeling. How we deal with it, some deal with drugs to try and kill it, some alcohol, whatever. There are millions of ways by which you can subside that voice, if you will. And I believe many do that, because I worked in a skilled nursing facility, and I've told the story before that I had an opportunity, and a wonderful opportunity, to sit down with folks that were in their 70s and 80s and 90s that were waiting to be escorted to the next development of their human spirit. And to hear those stories of regrets and sadness that they didn't know who I lived this, I did that. And I remember watching their faces, and you could see the pain um, of buying into the program, if you will. And at this stage of their life, we're asking those questions, and we're giving permission for those questions to be answered. But they were so frustrated that they had gave up so much. But yeah, I believe many choose not to listen to it, but I believe every single human being has those questions being asked because we're all connected in a way. We are all independent, but interdependent as well, Brett. I believe that from my heart. And so I don't think there's not a soul on this planet that doesn't have that conversation. But what we do with it is all up to us. And so you've gained the things and you're moving through life and, to obtain the things. And I love the fact that you said it didn't satisfy you all the money. I've interviewed millionaires. I keep telling people if money satisfied people, millionaires would not be committing suicide. So there must be something else. And so um, uh, you are moving forward, you're making all of these things, and you're checking in from time to time. As you're moving forward and going, as you're getting aged, as they say, you're going in, you just went through a couple of phases. Phase one, you're in phase two, and you're acquiring your things. As you're there in phase two, and you're looking at you, looking out, what were some of those things that you started to contemplate again in phase two as you're looking in, looking out further in your life, if you will? What were some of those things that you were seeing and that you said, I need to start pursuing or finding out about them?
So let me talk about the concept of wealth. My career was in wealth management.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent 35 years, working with families and individuals that were extraordinarily wealthy. Now that was along the line of the 35 years. What
Yeah.
I recognized, and it came, to fruition, and you identified this as having spoken with millionaires. So we'll talk about that in a second. But what I
Yeah.
recognize is that wealth is not just the financial. That
Mm-hmm.
was kind of the thing for me, is that as my bank account grew and my things grew,
Yeah.
that was like wealth resources. But
Yeah.
as I said, it didn't bring contentment.
Yeah.
And when I think of wealth now, and I didn't think about it in this logical manner back then, but when I think of it now, I think that wealth is made up of a number of facets. There's
Mm-hmm.
relational wealth. So, how it is that I ended up with the spouse that I have and the daughter that I have and the relationship with friends and even this relationship that you and I are having right now, that brings wealth. Okay.
Yes.
There is mental and spiritual wealth. Peace of mind is so critical. And that is,
Mm-hmm.
you are very wealthy when you have
Yes.
peace of mind, is what I found.
Yes.
You're very wealthy when you have transcendent understanding. And that is a component of wealth.
Yeah.
There's the wealth of our physical being. Like when I'm not physically well, I'm not
Yeah.
physically wealthy, right? So
Yeah.
there's that component of things. And then there's the wealth of time, which thank you
Yes.
for alluding to that at the beginning of this, because time is wealth, right? I mean, and
Yep. Mm-hmm.
so when I started to look at, I'm a wealth manager. What is the
Yeah.
best wealth manager that's going to bring to the table? It wasn't just how can I grow your investment portfolio? It's how
Yeah.
can I help you and me with my relationships, with the physical, with the mental and spiritual, and with time. And when that kind of came to be, true wealth, what I will
Yeah.
call true wealth, really comes into being. By the way, financial wealth is still a component of wealth. It's just
Yes.
that when you say that people have bought off on the program, I think that the
Yeah.
program has kind of overemphasized financial
Mm-hmm.
wealth as the
Yes.
cure or the solution for all the other components that are in our soul and our spirit, which need to be filled with relationships,
Yes. Yeah.
time,
Absolutely.
physical, those
Absolutely.
kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because I tell all the time, you look at these athletes, these young athletes that acquire wealth, financial wealth, and you see them in their behavior absolutely poor because of a mindset. And so, and you look at them and you say to yourself, what is wrong with that individual? Because you notice that there's a problem that they need to address because they've been, for whatever reason, you know, they are programmed, if you will, just to behave that way. That's inside of them, and now you need to go and get some help, to begin to look at other aspects of who you are. Like you were talking about, Bret, is wealth is such a big, powerful word, um, and the meaning of it. Let me ask you a question. As you are having all these type of clients, how and when in your journey did that perception became a reality to you, and not just where you were looking at the money part of it? Can you remember when that shift began to happen in you and you began to notice something?
Yes. And it came directly from the clients themselves. Here's why.
Mm,
Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, conversations would go like this in a meeting. Tell me what the money is going to do to my kids.
mm,
I'm so concerned about my kids growing up in a way that is either entitled or whatever, just that what is it going to do to my kids? Or they would ask, why don't I have peace of mind? Like, you just showed me my balance sheet and we're investing literally for generations that are 4 or 5 down the road. I mean, there was substantial
yeah,
wealth with the clients that I served, and yet they didn't necessarily have peace of mind, or they wanted to know what their legacy might be, right? And so I started
yeah,
to see that the core service offering of investment management, or cash flow, these kinds of things, which were table stakes for me, that's what they hired me to do, were
yeah,
not what the questions that ultimately they were asking. Now, did they ask that right from the start? Of course not. I built a relationship with them, and
yeah,
my clients, where they knew that I was a trusted advisor. And when you're talking about some of these issues like children and spouses and bank accounts, these are very, very, you know, uh, they're very sensitive areas. And so
yeah,
the ability to develop that relational wealth between myself and my client was first and foremost the most important thing. And then I started to see this pattern of like,
mm,
why is it that these are the questions that are being asked, as opposed to
yeah,
tell me the best investment strategy or the investment vehicle or what trust we should set up and those kinds of things. Of course, those were conversations that were had, but they were
yeah,
not the things that were necessarily, always on the table of what really mattered for the folks at that level. So, I learned from my clients, and then I started to just look at myself, my own life, and thought,
yeah,
okay, I don't have the bank account that they do, but I've got
yeah,
the same questions, right?
yeah,
How about my daughter? How about my spouse? What am I doing in
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of that? So that's where it all started to come together for me.
Yeah, and I'm sure that that's what propelled you to start moving into phase three, if you will, to start looking in and creating these programs that you have. Okay, here you are, you're shifting, you're learning, you're seeing the similarities within all people when it comes to wealth and having it, and the need for something else. As you're moving forward, Bret, and you're getting all this information and you're having conversations with your wife and the family and stuff like that, and you're now going to start to pivot going into phase three, as you said, what did that pivot look like? And the conversations that you were having with yourself now, as you're beginning to make this pivot and you're seeing it, you've been um, in it for a while, but not on your own in the sense where it's yours. You're putting this thing together. How did that pivot begin to look, and how did you feel about it when you began to move it?
Great question. Thank you so much for that opportunity to talk about that. Listen, it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I was purposeful about this next stage. I'm a relatively young man. I probably look younger than I actually am, believe it or not, but I'm a relatively young man. And I was very purposeful in thinking to myself, I don't want to get to a stage to where it's too late to give
Yeah.
back. I want to still have the energy, physical energy, and the energy to learn more things and that kind of stuff. And so I was very purposeful in terms of thinking about, pivoting into this next phase. There's a one particular thing, and I let me share this story because I
Yeah.
think it's really, important. I had taken a position up in San Francisco, and my family was down in Los Angeles, and I would commute every single week, between LA and San Francisco, and this one Friday, as I was coming home, I flew home, and I decided that I would take the bus home from the airport. Okay, now if you're familiar with Los Angeles, you don't take the
Yeah.
bus in
You
Los
don't do
Angeles, okay? You take the bus in San Francisco, but you don't take the
Yeah.
bus in Los Angeles. All right. I decided, well, I've been taking the bus in San Francisco. I'm going to take it in LA. So I did. I got home relatively late. And of course, the
Yeah.
bus doesn't show up for an hour or something. And I get on the
Yeah.
bus, and the people that are on the bus are probably a different walk of life than what I was used to. I mean, I think there were some that probably had their license suspended for reasons that
Yeah.
I'm going to guess I understand. But it was just a different kind of crowd. And I
Yeah.
remember, and I write about this in the book that I wrote, I
Yeah.
remember thinking to myself, wow, this is really interesting. I have been on the Boeing business jet with my clients, which is like flying Air Force One. And here I
Yeah.
am on this bus traveling
Yeah.
home. And it was just a very interesting kind of dynamic. And you talk about pivot points. I remember thinking back at that, right at that point in time, as I was on that bus, to a
Mhm.
time, believe it or not, many years before, when I had traveled to Europe in between graduating from college and going to my job. And I
Yeah.
came into, had a backpack, a Eurail pass, and a hitchhiker's thumb, and barely two nickels to my name. But I did this, 6-week travel in Europe,
Yeah.
and I went to Florence, Italy. Not everyone gets to go to these places. I was fortunate
Yeah.
enough I did, took a chance. In Florence, I went to this museum, and just bear with me on this because this is really
Yeah. No, go
pivotal for me.
ahead. Yeah.
In Florence, Italy, there's a museum. I'm not a museum guy. I'm
Yeah.
an athlete kind of the thinker, as I've already said.
Yeah.
But I went, and it turns out that what is there are works of Michelangelo. And that's
Yeah.
why I went. Oh, I know Michelangelo. I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And these works are statuary works of his. And here's the interesting thing about it is that there's a hallway, and there are 4 blocks of marble that are called the prisoners. And what they
Mhm.
are is partially completed works of Michelangelo. One, there's just a torso. Another one is an arm. Another one is half a body, and the rest is the block of marble. And
Yeah.
they're mesmerizing because you can literally see the perfect arm, but the
Yeah.
rest of it is stuck inside of this block of marble. It looks
Yeah.
as if these prisoners are trying to escape, literally.
Yeah.
And then the way the curator has done this, which is brilliant, is you turn this corner, and at the end of this hallway is the statue of the David.
Yeah.
And the statue of the David is the most amazing thing you will lay your eyes on. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It is just amazing.
Not yet.
It's 14 feet tall. It's massive. It is
Yeah.
literally perfect. I mean, it is really, and it takes your breath away on that bus. On that bus ride home, I remember thinking to myself, that's what life is like.
Yeah.
We start off of these blocks of marble, and there's chips that come, they chip away and stuff. Parents, teachers, they help to help us to kind of get out of our
Hmm.
raw material
Yeah.
to become the glory and splendor that we are, which is the
Yeah.
David, right? Which
Yeah.
is what is inside of us. Here's the problem that I found is that, and I think you touch on this, is that too often we go with the program that says this is what the chip should look like, and we
Yeah.
stay stuck. We
Yeah.
never become the David, or we
Yeah.
think to ourselves, the marble that I made out of, it's bad marble, or the chips
Hmm.
that have happened to me are uneven, or whatever the case is, and we stay stuck. I
Yeah.
thought to myself on that bus, no, there's more. And I
Yeah.
want to tap into that. And I'm going to be purposeful about figuring out how I can be my own David and I can help others
Yeah.
be their David, because there's nothing better than to
Yeah.
see somebody come alive, right? I mean, nothing better. I dig
Yeah.
that when I see somebody really come alive inside of it. So in my work, when I turned
Yeah.
over a project to somebody and I said, I'll help you, but I want you to be the one that gives the presentation to senior management, because then you get to see them really come alive.
Yeah.
That is glorious. That is splendorous. That is beautiful. So that was the pivot, if you will, in a particular moment, but it was really, kind of this whole lifelong journey, and continues to be a lifelong journey for me inside of, those that awareness.
Yeah, that's a powerful story, and listening to your story, Brett, and I've told people from the day one with this podcast, there's no such thing as coincidence.
Hmm.
Everything is purposeful. Look at your visit several years ago, and you got off of a plane and decided, of all things, to take a bus.
That's right.
Of all things. So, and it was that decision, as I said, life is a series of decisions. And sometimes it's just a simple decision that your whole world is moved from there, and it's given a deeper purpose. Here you are, and you were brought back to that hallway and walking in and seeing the masterpiece. And then you came back into your bus and you looked at the others and you go, wow,
Mm-hmm.
what a powerful um, uh, imagery for you that now spearheaded you and gave you the motivation that I always mention to people. Your dream has to be big enough that when you're exhausted, you wake up. And here you are looking at that hallway and looking at the bust of people. That's a powerful dream to always wake you up when you're looking and you saw the David and what the potential could be if one continues the work. And so, what a honor, man! And I said that to you on the onset, when you are honored to be in that position to see that transition. It is a holy place. It is one of the most holy things to witness, and only servants get to witness that. So here you are. You've made that. You're on the bus. You got this um, profound imagery and to give you the purpose to begin to move. Once you got that and you're on the bus, you got home now. You're going to lay down and that thing is going to resonate within your spirit and not let you rest at all. How did you now begin to take that image, that imprint that was deposited into your heart, and now began to put flesh on it, if you will? How did that begin to move forward? And what was some of those decisions and folks that began to come in your way to make that thing a possibility?
Well, there's a few things, and it always is this way. I don't think that anything is just binary, right? It doesn't just like, oh, this is
Yeah.
the next, this is the next. It's as
Yeah.
you say, there's
It's
all
just the flow.
these
Yeah.
little coincidences that happen.
Hmm.
So one area is just standing on the shoulders of giants, is what I
Yeah.
call it. There are others who have gone before us,
Yes.
and they are free mentors. That's how I view
Hmm.
it. And what I mean
Yeah.
by a free mentor is I can listen to a podcast
Podcast
and
or a
that
book.
person
Read
does
a
not
book.
know I
Yeah.
exist at all. And
Yeah.
yet I get to stand on the shoulders of giants. Or I
Yes.
can read or listen to a book and
Yeah.
I get to glean the wisdom that is applicable in that particular thing or the lack thereof. I mean,
Yeah.
discernment really comes into play, but
Yes.
standing on the shoulders of giants was one part of the path. Okay, I figured I'm a voracious reader. I want to learn and that kind of stuff, and I would just do that as part of my normal life. I wanted to coach. I knew
Hmm.
that the third part of my life was giving back. And I thought that the best way to do that was by coaching people. And I don't mean, sports coaching. I
Yeah.
mean, sitting down and mentoring with people, asking them questions, having them come up with their own aha moments. That's what coaching is about.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
telling somebody what to do. Anyone can do that. And it's
Yeah.
arrogant to even think that you know enough to like in somebody else's life. It's asking questions in a skillful way so that they can come up with their own aha moments. And
Yeah.
then there was also for me a component of putting this down on paper. I wanted to write about these things. People asked, and I ultimately I did. I published this book earlier this year. People asked, like, well, like what was the process of that? It was 10 years. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
literally 10 years. And it was, this is amazing, Ken. I
Yeah.
think you'll love this. I hope you will. I
Yeah.
do. I wrote on a card, a little business card,
Hmm.
I will write a book before the age of 60. That's what I said.
Awesome.
And I posted it in a
Yeah.
place that it's my prayer closet. Okay.
Yeah.
And I posted it there. And every once in a while I would look at it and I'd, oh, that's, whatever the case is. On February 28th of 2023, earlier this year, I submitted my final draft of my book, The Delta Theorem, to the publisher. My birthday,
Congrats.
my 60th birthday was March 10th, 2023. So accomplishing that was not like a, look at me type of
Yeah.
thing. It was the manifestation of years
Yeah.
of I have this goal. I'm going to make sure that I do the pieces like stand on the shoulders of giants and learn how to be a coach and learn how to write and all these things. And it was only through hard work and
Yeah.
effort and awareness did these things kind of come into being and allow me to be in the position that I am in today, which is I don't know if I'm going to have any significance or not. I don't know that. I don't know. People
Yeah.
will say whether they think that what I have to say is significant or not. I just know I'm now in a place where I can pursue that third period of my life, which is to give back. And the book gives me a platform, if you will, to be able to say, oh, let's talk about these things because I want to give what I've learned to you because I want
Yeah.
you to be David. I want you
Yeah.
to be your David, whatever that David is.
Yeah. I believe because the need was great, you had to go through what you did. I tell people we are independent, but we are interdependent, meaning that um, uh, uh, when there's a need, someone needs to go through the journey to be trusted to come out, to become the servant. I grew up in the church, and I just love how Jesus talked to people. He would look at them and says, "Where is your faith?"
Mm.
Where's your fate? He's walking on water. He's like, you can do it just like me. It's you. And he points back to them. And the coach is one that points back to them, let them see who they are. And I tell people the thing that he had said when he was leaving. He says, "Go and make disciples." And I tell people, a disciple is one who studies things. You can be a disciple in martial arts, in whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Disciple means that one becomes disciplined with it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you become disciplined, you will change the world. You'll change you first, and you'll change the world. So I believe, Bret, that you were called. You're not finished yet. There's a need that um, uh, the statue has to be has to happen. It has to come. People are waiting. They're walking around, and their arms are perfect, and everything else is a mess. It's
Yeah.
just a block. Their
Yeah.
foot is okay.
Yeah.
Everything else is a block.
Right.
You know. Go ahead.
Look, yeah. I there is one of my all-time favorite accounts from the Gospels where it's the time when Jesus goes down to, I think it's the pool of Siloam, I think it's called, and
Yeah.
there sitting next to the pool is a cripple who's been there for
Mm-hmm.
years, it says,
Yeah.
right? For years. And can never get into the pool to
Yeah.
get healed, right? And here's what happens. Jesus walks up to him and says to him, "What is it that you want?" I mean,
Yeah.
think about that for a second. It
Mm-hmm.
is almost a cruel question if you think
Yeah.
about it. Just like it's almost cruel. Like, what do you mean? If I'm that guy, I
Yeah.
look back up and I say, "What do you think I want?" Right? Like, what are you talking about? What do I
Yeah.
want? That's ridiculous. You know what I want. No, that wasn't the point. The
Yeah.
point was is that Jesus's question really got to the heart of the issue. Did
Yep.
he really want healing, or
Mm-hmm.
was he comfortable with where he was?
Yeah.
I might think like, no way he was comfortable where he was. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Don't be so sure that that was not the
Yep.
case. And so getting to the core of the question with people, like, what is it that you really want? Do you
Yeah.
want to be stuck as a prisoner, or do you want to be the David? That is a question that we all have to be able to answer, and like helping people understand that, even just asking the question in a
Yes.
way that is like really, because I
Yeah.
think that what happens and what I believe happened in that case is that Jesus was able to spark once again
Mm-hmm.
the excitement of life. What I want is
Yeah.
life. I want my
Yeah.
life back, right? I want life. And that is the core of what that thing is. And so I love that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that it was not just helping him get into the water. It was asking what it is that he wanted, truly wanted in that moment. It's profound, really profound.
Yeah. I love reading the Bible. The wisdom in his interaction with others is priceless. And
Mm.
so the depth of it and how he cuts through everything and he goes, as you said, to the root of the situation, and which a coach that is gifted, been through some stuff, knows the question to ask to get there to elicit a response. And that individual sitting before you, they've been living so busy. You got the kids, they got the work, they got the car, they got the bills, they got everything. That they haven't had the opportunity to even ask the question. And many of them, when you ask that question, they stand there and look back at you and go, I didn't even know that you could ask that question, and they're stunned at the fact because they've never taken the time to ask that question. And we understand why. So that's why I believe folks like yourself is necessary. And I always tell people, make sure you find a I don't even call him coach, a guide, a facilitator that has been through some stuff, that knows how to ask questions. Because if they don't, you are not going to get anywhere. You're just going to go circular. And I tell people, most people, when you're living a circular life, is because you haven't made a decision yet. Once you have made a decision, you would be amazed how your spirit, soul, and body will come together to make it happen. But you have to make that decision. Here you are, Bret. You've made this decision. You saw it, and it took you some while. And that's how things work. And you began to put the book together. How did all the other, as you began to look at each and every program, if you will, the performance program and stuff like that, I began to dissect them and dig deep and separate what you wanted to bring out of each. How was that process, and how did you come about that making that process as to the two, and how did you, as they say, excavate to get deeper to bring out specific things that you wanted from them?
I'm a pretty linear person. And it's not that everything has to line itself up, but I do, I think that thinking logically and rationally at some level, not like that it's just pure rationalizing,
Yeah.
everything, but I am just a linear person. So what I find is that most people, me included, we want to be told what to do. Just
Yeah.
tell me what to do. Is that going to be on the
Yeah.
test? Right? I mean, just
Yeah.
tell me what to do. And so what I found is knowing that about me and others, coming up with something that would be systematic in an approach would be beneficial. That's the
Yeah.
way that I thought about it. And so I created this book called The Delta Theorem. When I
Mm-hmm.
first came up with this title, I mean, people were like, wait, what? Theorem is
Yeah.
like, is this a math? I'm not good at math, right? I'm
Yeah.
not a scientist and that kind of stuff. No, 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 no. Wait, this is a systematized thing. And here's what it looks like, Ken. And just go with me on this.
Yeah.
The Delta Theorem is literally a math equation in appearance. It
Mm-hmm.
is alpha over p cubed by e f squared equals delta. Okay. People's minds are like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, what? Again,
Yeah.
I don't know math. No, wait. Here's what it means. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. What
Mm-hmm.
I found is that people, myself included, want to know what our primary purpose is, our one thing. That's what alpha stands for in this framework. First letter of Greek alphabet, what is my primary purpose? It
Yeah.
sits on top of a foundation, which is P cubed, which is priorities, principles, and passion. Ken, I think that you alluded to this earlier. When I sit down with people and I say to them, the first thing I ask is, what's your purpose? You know what I get? I have no
Yeah.
idea.
No, yeah.
I have no idea. And by the way, it's too big of a question to ask of me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I tell you what it is, does that mean it can never change? Like,
Yeah.
I don't like not having the optionality of having purpose change. So people
Yeah.
don't go there. They're like deer in headlights. But if I
Yeah.
say to them, tell me what your priorities are, well, I'm married. I have
Yeah.
kids. I have a career. Priorities, the things that are most important, are easier to come up with for people and they're
Mm-hmm.
accessible. If I say to them, tell me what your principles are, what do you absolutely stand for? Well, they can usually tell me some of those things. Let my yes be yes and my no be no, or I shall not
Yeah.
kill, or yeah, I mean, a bunch of
Yeah.
things like this, right? If I say to them, tell me what makes your hair on fire. What are you passionate about? They can usually tell me that. What I found is that when you take those three P's and you intersect them like Olympic rings intersect in the middle, where all
Yeah.
three of those priorities, principles, and passion intersect, purpose starts to reveal itself.
Yeah.
It starts to show itself. And so you asked me the question, what did I do? I started to systematize things. I started to say, purpose is so critical. You talk about getting through anything. If you know what your powerful why is, you know what your powerful why is, what your purpose is, you make better decisions because they're clear. Nope, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that. Yes, I'm going to do that. Oh, this is really hard. Well, I said I was going to do this, so that's what my purpose is, that kind of stuff. It helps tremendously. But
Yeah.
how do I find it? How do I get there? I saw that through just life experience, standing on the shoulders of giants, that priorities, principles, and passion, when pieced together, start to reveal what purpose actually is. So I systematize this kind of thought process of
Yeah.
like, how can I, do things around that? E stands for effort, because it's alpha over P cubed by E. So all of what I just talked about is aspirational. If you don't do anything with it, nothing happens, right? So
Yeah.
effort comes in, and then F stands for failure. I started to see that if I took my aspirations and I acted on it, that what was missing was that sometimes it doesn't work out. And what do I do with that? Right? Fail and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is the only place where math comes in, Ken. I said it's F squared, because usually failure is looked at as a negative in our lives.
Yeah.
And when you square a negative in math, it's a positive. I
Yes.
don't know how -2 times -2 is +4. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But that's the fact of the matter. And what I learned was that if we can learn from our failure, if we can square up our failures and learn from them, then you take your purpose, you activate it through effort, you learn from your failure. All that equals delta, which delta in it means change, impact, making a difference. The answer to your question, long-winded as it
Yeah.
was, is I
It's perfect.
saw that I want, like everyone else does, to have an impact. I want to make a difference. And how can I be put in the best position to do that? Well, it starts with purpose, and then it leads to activation of purpose, and it goes through failing and learning from failure. And then it puts me and others in the best position, not guaranteed, but the best
Yeah.
position to make a difference or have an impact. Systematic, easy to remember once you get over the like, oh, theorem, I don't like that word, right? These are just 6 elements that come into how to kind of put yourself in a great position to make an impact. That's what I wanted to try to do. So that's how it all came together.
That is awesome. I love it. All of you guys that are listening to us, um, Brett had mentioned about standing on the shoulders of giant. I have a giant here that have gone through some stuff, and you know how I feel about books and reading of an author's book. It is their substance, wisdom, knowledge, understanding. Those words have power. They are alive to those who can hear. I keep telling people you have to learn to transition from a listener to a hearer. When one hears something, it does something to them. And so you have to become a hearer of the word, Jesus said, not just a doer. As you begin to hear it, it will begin to change you. And so I tell them to sit down, find that space, quiet, and you bring that book because those words are alive. Allow it to jump off or leap off of those pages and lodge within you. and get you from where you are today to where you want to be. I will provide, Bret, this has been a powerful conversation, and all of you guys, I'm going to provide everything for you to get access to him. I suggest you should get the book for friends, parents, everyone. We were talking about, I mentioned earlier, there are people in the 80s and 90s that this book will help, and they would be, oh my God, I'm telling you, when you relieve and come out of that shell and become alive, give it as gifts. Give it to friends. Give it to folks that you don't like. Give it to your boss. Give it out, so that you can be an impact in their life, and you be an impact in yours as well. Bret, I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. This has been a wonderful conversation.
It's been a joy. Thank you so much for your encouragement and all that you're doing. It matters, and it matters a lot. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.